Wow, what a great garden. You can visit Danny and Gary's Chicksville in person along with other great chicken coops on the Austin Funky Chicken Coop Tour that is going to be coming up in March. So be on the lookout for that. Right now I'm joined by Liz Klein from Design My Yard, and we're going to be talking about one of the evil things out there in the garden, Bermuda grass, and how to deal with it, and why people really need to understand that if they have Bermuda grass in their yard and they expect a garden, there's certain steps that they're going to need to take.
Right, they have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Common Bermuda is our most noxious weed and really, really difficult to get rid of. When I go in people's yards and they have something simple like St. Augustine, not a problem. But when you have Common Bermuda, really you have to get rid of it before you're ready to create a garden, or else it will come right back. The roots go to China.
Yeah, the roots go to China. Indeed.
And last forever.
So I want to put this in perspective for folks, Liz, because you're called out to people's yards. You're a designer, and you install beautiful spaces for people, and they expect this to be done in a kind of a prompt manner.
Right.
And if Bermuda is present, it is a hugely complicating factor. It's a big difference in how you can deal with it than, say, a homeowner who maybe understands the problem and has months or even years to deal with the problem.
That's right. If you're a homeowner, you can take your time and use a lot of organic methods and different mechanisms to get rid of it over time, and it's not a big deal. But when you have a commercial company and you're trying to get in and get out, people don't want you to be there 3 or 4 months dealing with their yard.
Right.
But really, to get rid of it, honestly, what we found, because now a lot of yards have it due to the drought and people's grass died and in came the Common Bermuda, is we have found commercially that you spray it as judiciously as possible with an herbicide, and then you let it sit, and sometimes it seriously takes 2 or 3 applications to get rid of it. In the times when we have tried doing it once, not successful. And really down the long road, it's more complication to not get it initially.
And when you say not successful, you don't just spray it once and then walk away and put plants in the ground. You also use physical control in addition to the spraying. You put down weed barriers and things like that, but it still
comes up. I can honestly say that spraying it once and then putting a weed barrier down, people think that will do it. It really doesn't. It comes up through it, it goes around it, it comes up through the holes where you plant the plants. It can be disastrous.
Right, right. And you actually have images that show a beautiful landscape space that you created where this exact scenario unfolded.
And that's really where I learned it. It was probably 2006, and 2/3 of the yard had St. Augustine, which you can chip out easy, no problem, create beds, mulch it, plant it, great. A little corner of the yard in the driest, hottest spot had Common Bermuda. We sprayed it, we thought we had it, looked like we had it, planted it, put down the weed barrier, put in the decorative rock, and half a year later it was horrible. Completely covered. And the good news, thankfully, was it was just a little 10 by 10 space, and so I learned in a very small area. Had that been an entire front yard that we had taken out 100 by 50, it would have been cataclysmic for me.
Right.
So I learned, this isn't going to work this way. We really need to make sure this stuff's gone.
Right. Now, like you said, for a homeowner who is intent on gardening and making that time investment and learning about the plants and acknowledging the fact that a garden really is a
living, breathing thing.
And an act of labor.
That's true. A labor of love.
And I think about it in my own case. I had Bermuda in a garden I used to work. It took me, I had a patch of Bermuda in there that had invaded from an adjoining property.
Right.
It took me 2 years, 2 years of constant weeding and attacking. Diligence. You have to be, I had to really just go after it to get rid of it.
Well,
you don't have that luxury.
No, and probably 80 to 90% of the people that call to have their yard done are homeowners, not gardeners.
Right.
Are not people that really understand any of it. They're people that bought a house that has a lot of grass and a few bushes in the front, and really they want low water and as little maintenance as possible. And most people say to me, I'd like to take out 100% of my grass. Since the drought in 2011, let's just rip out the grass, rip out the grass. Well, to rip out all the grass, then you have there are always weed seeds in the ground. And water and light, you're going to have something popping up. Even if it's not common Bermuda, something's going to come up. So you have to cover all of that area with beds or walkways or DG or something. You have to, wrap your mind around the fact that it may not end up being low maintenance to take out all your grass.
No. In fact, it's probably not going to be low maintenance.
That's
It's just the opposite, that a
right.
garden bed requires your attention.
A lot more than mowing. I tell people, imagine going out with your lawnmower, a couple strips more of lawn, big deal. That's a lot less work to run a couple of lawnmower strips than it is
Right.
to weed it, to prune it, to fertilize it. There's an illusion that taking out all your grass is low maintenance. And I just kind of want people to understand it could end up being a nightmare.
Sure.
If you're a homeowner, not a gardener.
Right. And again, we encourage people to make the investment of becoming gardeners,
Right.
of working with a piece of land and
That's
being
right.
dedicated to it and being good stewards of that.
Right.
But for most of the folks that we're talking about here are people who are calling a landscape company, come in and do this for me.
Right. Bing, bang, boom. Instant gratification.
Now, so, you can take the organic approach. You've referenced that you use Roundup in particular, actually herbicide. And there are ways that you can be diligent about your use of herbicides too. I mean, you don't just
Willy-nilly throw it all
right.
over.
So
That's right.
some common sense tips for people using it.
Well, first of all, Roundup only works if the plant is actively growing. And the more actively growing, the better, because the whole premise of Roundup is that it is foliar translocate. So it goes in through the foliage, goes down to the roots die, the plant topples over.
Right.
You can't spray it in the winter because there's nothing actively growing. The
Right.
more actively growing, the better. So I would say the best scenario for a homeowner or for us would be to go, obviously, on a windless day where it's not going to blow it all over the place. On a day where it's not going to rain for the next 2 or 3 days, so that you know that whatever you put on that foliage isn't going to get washed off by rain or get in the water table. You want to keep it all on the plant if humanly possible.
And I think this is a critical point.
Yeah.
Look at the weather forecast.
That's right. Look at the weather forecast, because what good does it do you to put it on and then have it get rained off? It's
Right.
foolish.
Yeah.
And then I would also have the grass be a little bit high, because the more foliage that there is, the less is getting on the ground, on the soil itself, and the more is being translocated down to the base of that.
Some perfect common sense ways to think about this. And of course, protect yourself. Wear sleeves, gloves,
That's right.
all the other stuff that you need to do.
Right.
But there are occasions where these kind of interventions, if you intend to garden, you don't have much alternative but
Right.
to attack something like Bermuda grass, which is really a difficult problem to have. Now, we've talked about the scenario of this space where you had this lesson.
Right, I did have.
But you have some wonderful images that you've shared with us about what the results can be when you had the bad experience, but then you corrected it and voila, right?
That's right. And I think the important part is you really need to know what kind of grass you're starting with. If you have St. Augustine, or if you have buffalo that's petered out because the trees have given you too much shade, or you have or weeds, that's not a big deal. You can scrape that stuff off and start right in and not spray anything. But it's really when you have common Bermuda that it's absolutely a whole different beast. It's like having little tiny bamboo. It's just
I think
nasty.
that's a really good.
It's nasty stuff.
It's like I'd think of Bermuda in the same class as bamboo.
Exactly.
It's a very
running bamboo.
Right.
All
yeah.
down Mopac.
They're both kind of monstrous plants.
That's
Bamboo is probably easier to deal with than Bermuda.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly think that Bermuda's the worst.
Okay, so we're officially creating the I Hate Common Bermuda
right.
Grass
That's right.
Garden Club here. But again, once you've created a garden space, and some people, we may have scared people to the point where they're afraid of this invader.
Right.
There are some common sense things for weed prevention that you can do in your garden. Thick application of mulches,
That's
make
right.
it much easier
That's
to
right.
weed, et cetera. What are some of the things that you tell
Well,
homeowners?
I try to tell people initially that there are always weed seeds in the ground, millions of them, and water and light and bare dirt, you're going to have a weed. Some kind of weed. And so cutting down the light is the key thing. So that's why mulch, 3 inches of mulch is good. Even decorative rock, if you use it with weed barrier, is good. Anything that cuts down your light will keep the weeds down. And certainly as plants grow and they create shade because there's less space on the ground, you also end up with a lot less weeds.
Sure. So, and again, A big thing for in thinking about the difference between a homeowner and a gardener.
Right.
A gardener will be out there. There's an old saying: the best thing for a man's gardens is a shadow.
Right,
It's
that's
like,
right.
and a gardener's shadow is going to be present in the garden because gardeners
right.
are out there. They're doing things.
Right.
They're paying attention.
And they
care.
love it.
They love it.
That's right.
why
They
we're out
love it.
there.
That's right.
So, the gardener's shadow is a good weeder.
Exactly.
But if you're not one of those shadow kind of people, then
Right.
you take control of the situation early.
That's right.
Right.
And I think, got it.
No, well, good.
Well, I was just thinking that, as part of the gardening community, I think we as gardeners have a responsibility to help people who are homeowners to understand that that we are stewards and that it is harder to do than just rip out your grass. I think we need to be emissaries for that.
Good. Excellent advice. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you
the
for having
program.
me.
I appreciate it very much.
Appreciate
As again, Liz Klein from Design My Yard, and coming up next is our friend Daphne.